And we are rolling.
How Madakiapi, Kola, Iuha, Ichichiab, Lila, Daya, Yahipalo. Welcome to Cut to the Chase, episode number 6. We are broadcasting, we are webcasting, we are coming at you live from the sacred Black Hills, deep within the Republic of the Lakota. Every show, we run down the latest highlights on news and subjects, happenings, anything impacting Indigenous country. And we cover leaders impacting our course at the intersection of the mainstream world and indigeneity. And we've got quite a show for you tonight. We can finally say, finally we can breathe. Deb Haaland, as you know, has been confirmed as the Secretary of the Interior by a 51-40 vote. We'll let Tokata Iron Eyes, who's joining us tonight from the East Coast, from the Atlantic Coast, and Krystal Tubals, who is joining us from either from the Black Hills or from the Northern Cheyenne homelands, I would assume. We'll also be able to highlight some of the recent Biden appointees. Big respects to those who've been appointed to key federal posts throughout Indigenous country. We'll see you in our shout out sessions later during the show. Before we get to Deb Haaland, I'm privileged to bring in a brother that I just met over the interwebs and so forth. This is Chairman Juan Mancias of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribal nation along the United States and Mexican colonial border. We'll have a discussion with Chairman Mancias. Lastly, I want to spend some time in my outro going over House Resolution 1, HR 1, the Protect the People Act. This is, of course, a new Voting Rights Act. I would like to go over that at the end of the show and weave together the work that we've been able to do with the Native American Voting Rights Act. Thank you all for joining. It's always an honor and a privilege to come to you and to spend. We try to shoot for an hour. Sometimes it's an hour and a half, but we try to make sure that we are able to spend an hour with you. And we cannot, because of our work schedules, commit to a certain time, but Wednesdays or Thursdays, just kind of be ready and look for the flyers pretty much on the day of. That's kind of how we've been operating, but that's okay. Whoever is meant to join us will join us. But before I bring in Chairman Mancias, I wanted to cut to a short documentary called The Pushback. And it is a documentary that was done during the Trump administration. Knock on wood. Chairman Mancias was involved with other thought leaders, other diverse voices across Texas. The Pushback is designed to fight racism, fight cruelty, and help our species evolve in a way that we deserve to in our day and age. But Control, if we could roll in that video from The Pushback.
And they know that, just like we talk about inherent rights to migrate, we have an inherent right to stand up for the land that our ancestors lived on. You're walking on our ancestors right now, The sign there says that human remains are humans, so respect them. They've been moving bodies, the remains that they find at these places like this.
If you can't hear, just tell them.
Dig these people up, put them wherever they want, and without any respect to what's really happening. They have a 150-foot enforcement zone. that they'll clear all this area.
Yeah, and they're gonna even out the.
Hold on. Okay, so let's see.
Okay, so that is a video by the Pushback. And I wanted to bring Chairman Mancias. Everything worked out while we were doing tech checks.
Can't hear
but we can hear you, Chairman. We can. Somebody message him that we can hear him. And for our audience who is all tuned in, thank you for bearing with us.
My microphone is muted.
We're good. Tell him we're good.
We can hear you.
Can you hear us?
He can't hear us. Okay, but Chairman Mancias comes from the Comecrudo. His people have originated within, have civilized, have created relations with the lands, the waters, and the sacred sites in what is now called Texas, along the U.S.-Mexico colonial border. And I say that with intent because it's a recognition that this reality is propped up for us. And it is woefully and poisonously colonial, given that Trump's border wall was used as a dog whistle to criminalize and traffic indigenous children and families who have a prior right to travel, who are fleeing conditions that we are sometimes, a lot of times, responsible for in this country, who've been upgraded from kids in cages to kids in influx facilities. But I wanted to catch up with Chairman Mancias regarding his people's struggles. I don't know if you can hear me, Chairman, but if you can, we're going to send you a text to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you are for the benefit of our listeners.
Go ahead.
I'm having a hard time. I can't hear you.
We can hear you.
Bear with us, listeners. This is Chairman Mancias.
It says on the air and says you're in the show, but the host muted your mic. Can you hear me now? I can't hear you. That's why.
Tell him it's okay that we
I still can't hear you. I know you can hear me. Well, my name is Juan Mancias. I'm the tribal chair for the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe of Texas. I was born in Dimmitt, Texas, just north in the Panhandle of Texas, and I was one of the first generations to be born away from the Rio Grande Valley, and we've maintained our tribal identity and tribal culture for a long ways, and we were trying to always be a people that maintain that identity. So when of course we know where our sacred sites are on both sides of this river, and of course with the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty and also with the Gaston Purchase Treaty, they threw a border on top of our of the river and made a border that divided many nations along that area, and to the point where the Indian policy in Texas was to get rid of all the natives, and that was their ongoing message for a long time. It has been something that continues to be one of the hardest things to deal with, because we have relatives on both sides of the river. And when they came in with the wall, and actually we've been fighting it since 2005, when Clinton first proposed the wall, and then of course later it was the Bushes, and then came Obama's wall too, and then of course we've had to struggle with the this craziness that they were going to make Mexico pay for it, and of course that wasn't going to happen, and so we took one of our villages back and occupied it, and we were there for a little over a year occupying it, and we stopped a lot of what was going on for a long time because we kept monitoring the movements and what they were doing. And when we started announcing that there was so much money just to build
like 50 miles of wall, less than 50 miles. It was actually like 10 miles of wall that it was built, and spent like $10 million on it. We were there when Colfax and Bannon decided that they were going to build up their own private wall, which compromised the banks of the Rio Grande, and it's going to cause some problems later on when there are any floods that come along. We've been talking about this for a long time, and letting people know that these are village sites that have been compromised as well. These are old, a lot of our village sites and some of our sacred sites for us. And when we have a ceremony that connects us to the earth, we need to be able to respect that connection to that earth. And that's where a lot of our people were their umbilical cords were being connected to the Mother Earth, and making us a more a person more connected to who we are, and through the land, because we don't own the land owns us. Our ancestors are the ones that give us that perspective, and we've been there since first contact, in the early 1500s, when the Spanish fort at the Rio Grande came in and really tore up a lot of our villages and started, hurting our own people and killing our people.
Wow.
And this is why we try to make sure that we continue to develop a strong understanding of the history of Texas and the original people of Texas. And what's happened, there's a lot of displaced tribes that were brought in through the Spanish, and a lot of the things that were happening when they were missing children, taken away from the separation of families that happen now, have been happening to us since first contact. And we've been trying to be able to let people know that it's something that's been a succession of degradation, of trying to do away with who we are. And when we start talking about the environment and start talking about climate change, we were a migratory people, and we traded, and so we lived on the sacred grounds. And the reason that we started taking a stand there is because nobody was taking a stand, because this is where the peyote grounds are. And so, and us being directly connected and documented as the people that were on these peyote grounds, we have to be able to protect that which is ours, especially the medicine and the sacred things that are there. And that's why, we took a stand. And it was right before Trump left office that they found 2 village sites, which were my band's, the Cotonames band of sites that were right there in Hidalgo County and in Starr County. And then all of a sudden we get a letter from them telling us that they want to sit and talk about what they found. What they actually found was almost like 20 villages along that area. So I mean, who knows how many other villages they've torn up just to build their agricultural and their industries on top of our ancestors. So this has been happening for a long time, and it's been happening because there's no clear policy in Texas about, respect for those burial grounds. And that's why we took a stand at the Eli Jackson Cemetery, which was a actual Freedmen's cemetery that was used also as Underground Railroad into Mexico for the runaways that would come through Texas and into Mexico, where there was no slavery. And of course this is one of the things that nobody pays attention even to Eli Jackson. When we first got there, it was covered with weeds, and it being a state a state historical site, that you would think that they would take care of it and clean it up, and never did. And then now you go there, and everybody's taking care of it, and we're trying to remove all of the things that we brought in there to try and take care of it for that year and a half. So yes, we continue to we have a land claim on Hidalgo County and Starr County, and we're trying to get those land claims to all the 254 counties in Texas, and basically because our territories would run all the way up into Kansas, And I think that we need to make our people aware of that.
Chairman, when I if you can't hear me, can you hear me? Okay, it looks like the chairman can't hear me, but we can all hear you just fine. Thank you for that introduction. Part of our struggle as indigenous nations is this idea about blood quantum and federal recognition. Now, the Comecrudo, your nation is not recognized by the colonial construct. And so I'm hoping that we can, if you can read the chats.
One of the things that we're finding out since we've been so effective in what's happening down there is that a lot of people are starting to do DNA studies, and I keep telling them that DNA means definitely Native American, but they do, and they find out that they're anywhere from 30% to about maybe 54% native of that area. And then that's where we have to be able to start telling them that we have to be able to bring them on board to understand more of the teachings of the land and understand that there are many paintings that are there too. We try not to deal with the idea of the blood quantum thing, but it's we have to look at how much of these people are our relatives. Because one of the we live by 3 prime directives right now, and that's know your people, reclaim your lands, and don't let your people die by another. And those are our 3 prime directives. And we want to be able to look at setting up the resistance the resistance camps that we do set up are basically to understand that the native or the original people of Texas, the native original people of Texas, are our front lines, and we are the resistance, and we have to be able to do that. Some of them do it in a very colonized manner by trying to get state recognition, which in 1969 they took away from us. They took away the State Indian Commission, which created problems where there was no state recognized tribes anymore. And right now we only have 2 of them, and that are state recognized, and there's 3 federally recognized tribes, but they're also not native to Texas, so they have no claim to the sacred sites because they actually don't have any connection to that. And that's why when we talk about the quantum and federal recognition, which we're already working on right now, we got like 20 lawyers that are working on our recognition right now, and we have the documentation, and we have actual continuation to the first contacts, like the original chiefs that were here, like Juan Savieta and Quiz Benive and Capitan Jose Miguel and others, like my direct descendant, Chief Natakasia. And we can also share that with anybody about the massacre at Devil's River. And we start finding out that this connection is there all the time. Well, we would love to start having a webcast of our own too here to really create the activism that needs to be understood, that we are the front lines. And as Estokna, that's how we call ourselves in our language, Estokna. We are, and we call Texas Somisek. So we want to be able to talk about these things that let people know that we're there to help in their better understanding of who they are, along with their teachings, if they have any teachings, or if they happen to be one of our bands, or they happen to be one of our clans. And that's one of the things that we want to be able to do, and also at the same time help them to be there. Standing Rock, what it meant to me was that I just wanted to make sure that that people understood how nations can come together. And our flag was there, we're flying. It made me feel, good that we were able to be accepted through the other nations that understand what it is to be the original people of the land, to have a language and understand that that language is the experience of the land. When you speak the language, you should be connected to that land.
You say it, you ask it.
Thank you for that, Chairman. We do want, and again, there's always something. We don't ever have a show that's completely free of technical challenges, but our audience is dedicated, and I thank you for sticking with us. Chairman can't hear me speaking, but I just want to offer the Chairman any closing thoughts, any way people can support you. We're sharing your website, the thought of webcasting. We would gladly help on that as soon as we get it together as well. But, and I say that in jest, we're doing an amazing job here. I've got a team that is making this happen. State recognition and federal recognition, that is going to come into direct question now with Deb Haaland as the new Secretary of the Interior. But I'm going to pause and see if we can get the Chairman to close us out.
Well, I think that the things that I think we need to understand is that we need to change the narrative. We need to understand that we need to make our people, the native original people of the land, more comfortable and quit trying to make the colonizer, or whatever you want to call it, making them comfortable. If they're uncomfortable, that means that they have to learn to accept who we are, where we're at. We got to change the narrative. We've got to change the narrative from like the words critical infrastructure that was passed here on the no protest law. We got to let them understand that for them, it might be the pipelines, and it might be the walls, and it might be all this gentrification that is happening. But for us, it's the water, the air, and also the land. And we have to understand that we are the land. We are the water, because when we're like 70% water, and when we cross over, that water doesn't go into outer space. It becomes part of what's happening here. And that's why I just want to be able to say that when we see that water and touch that water, we're actually touching our ancestors, and we purify ourselves with that water by taking baths, and that's staying connected to our ancestors. So I really want to thank you, because we do need help down here. We're trying to hire staff that stays on all the time. We got nothing but volunteers working for the tribe, and it gets hard because they have to also make a living, and it's really hard to do that. So I just wanted to say those things. Thank you for letting us come on, and I hope you can help us with our webcast.
Chairman, Lila Wopila Tanka Ichichapelo Itancha Nish. You are a leader. You are somebody that our people are depending upon to make sure we achieve nationhood, not only the quote unquote federal recognition within this system, this colonial system. As I mentioned before, one concrete way that Chairman Mancias and his people's struggle of the Comecrudo, one way that highlights the direct connection to Deb Haaland, is the Secretary of the Interior could expedite or possibly solely grant recognition to the Comecrudo, just like when Trump disestablished the Mashpee Wampanoag, the Secretary of the Interior could have a lot to say about that. And so it is historic. It's unheard of that Deb Haaland is now in that position. And I want to jump into that. Deb Haaland, it's not very often. It's monumental, as you know. In real time, we are rewiring the foundations of our country. We have to appreciate the magnitude of this continuing moment. The Department of Interior's sole purpose is to absorb Native nations. to subsume our original sovereign bodies within the body of the colonizer. This is the process of colonization, or federal Indian law, or the trust responsibility. The department's job is to maintain and uphold forced dependency, to uphold land theft and continued illegal occupation and attempted annexation of indigenous nations' homelands. This is a difficult and appropriate role for Madame Secretary Haaland. I don't know what's possible. Can she grant unfettered access to U.S. tourist destinations inside the National Park Service and other agencies under her direction, which also happen to be our sacred sites? Can she put those federal lands into co-stewardship models? I don't know. That all remains to be seen. But the fact that the corporate extractive shills have turned out in numbers to delay her appointment this long should signal that we have entered into a new phase of power. It should also signal the fact that Standing Rock shook the world, and that revolutionary spiritual liberation potential sits in the bellies of all who seek that connection. Now, before I bring on our next guest, I'd like to cut to a short video of Tokata Iron Eyes and Deb Haaland having a little sit meet. And I believe this was during the Indigenous Peoples March of 2019. So Control, if we could roll that video, please.
What can young people do to support these things? Like, because some of us can't vote yet, but like there still has to be some sort of outlet for us to like
How old
do
are you?
things. I'm 15.
My daughter started canvassing with me when she was 9. So she's been working on campaigns since she was 9 years old. I would love for you to just get involved. Where do you live?
I live on the Pine Ridge Reservation right now.
Yeah.
I lived in Standing Rock for 4 years, but I think like a huge thing on the reservation is it's really hard to get kids interested in politics or just really anything outside of our communities, just because everything is so rural. And like even during Dakota Access, like just having to like, you know, there was this huge movement happening at Standing Rock, but then when I would come back to school, it was still the same sort of attitude that nothing is going to change. And so
But things are changing.
Yeah.
You can prove that. You can, you know, if we have the first 2 Native American women elected to Congress, and that shows change, right?
Yeah.
So you know, I started out just by helping other people, by making sure that my voice was heard, whether it was calling on the telephone to get people to get out and vote, registering voters. I mean, all of those things, right? It's time for Native people to be represented. It's time for us for people to hear our voices. It's time for the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women to stop. And so perhaps that was the reason that you know, the thought came in my mind to say I'm going to run for office, right? Because we don't put our own thoughts in our head. They're given to us, right? And we have to act through the you know, the inspiration of our ancestors and other people who are working to make sure that, you know, we're listening.
Wow. Thanks for that video and doing that meeting. And I weaseled in there somehow, but I want to introduce our next guests, Krystal Tubuls at the part of the screen there with the land back flag in the background, and Tokata Iron Eyes, of course. Tokata is my daughter, and Krystal is Tokata's first cousin. Like, we're keeping this strictly within the fam right here. So I didn't ask you guys for bios. I just, Krystal was named as, along with a couple few others of select people, as a defendant in a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit that Energy Transfer Partners brought at the conclusion, or perhaps during, the No DAPL struggle. Krystal used to work with the Center for Constitutional Rights and also the veteran organization About Face, which continues to confront the military industrial complex. Tokata, of course, is cutting her own path. She is a youth organizer, an indigenous feminist, an activist, who during No DAPL kind of had no choice to enter the fray, so to speak. She watched her mother be wrongfully arrested by those at Morton County. She worked with 0 Hour, with March for Our Lives. Tokata welcomed Greta Thunberg to Indigenous country not so long ago, and with the help of Indian Collective, led a direct action right here in Rapid City, South Dakota. So it's just, thank you guys for coming on. I really do appreciate that on such short notice. But I want to turn the discussion over to you in light of Deb Haaland's historic appointment. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for women, for Indigenous women, for Indigenous nations, for Americans, for colonial extraction? Like, what does it mean to you to have Deb Haaland confirmed as our new Secretary of the Interior? And I'll throw it over to Tokata first, since you're the youngest. Respect the elders. Please take it away.
Yeah, I guess watching that interview was definitely like a little bit of a surreal experience, because I think I would say a lot of things differently now. Especially like in my view of progress in American government, and American politics in general, I think that I definitely have learned a lot more about, and I just have certain, acquired depth about my understanding, right, that the systems that allow for people to be in such positions, the systems that allow for the Department of to exist, right, as and for an Indigenous representative to be affirming that agency's claim to land ownership is definitely something now that like weighs heavy on my heart for sure. I would say it's like it's kind of like one way 100%. Because we had connection to the Secretary of the Interior, and she's a Native woman, who it means to be inherently connected to the land, to be of the land. And on the other end, right, isn't it so much more kind of telling of US exploitive systems and colonialist exploitive systems in general, that in order to be recognized as Indigenous peoples as valid in our stewardship of land in any way, right, before that could happen, somehow we had to ascend under occupation and assimilate in such a way that we could be our own oppressor, in a sense. And so it's definitely a little bit of both, and I'm definitely still like working through that and trying to figure out like my exact feelings on that. And I'd really like to hear more from you, Krystal, too, because like seeing all the news and the happiness about it, like on one hand, like 100%, like it's definitely something to celebrate. There has never been a Native woman in a position like this, and it's so powerful to Indigenous youth and Indigenous young women everywhere to see that they can 100% be in positions of power. I think that the way this particular position and positions of power within American politics, what they represent on a systemic level, right, is something that is intrinsically opposite of what it means to be an Indigenous person. And so I think that, like my father said earlier, it's 100% correct, and it's 100% an anomaly. I don't to put that, but it is a deep, and it's also right now our only chance for survival.
Thank you for that, Tokata. Krystal, we'd like to just get your thoughts on, what it means to you to have this monumental occurrence. I think Tokata sliced it right down the middle there. We're ambivalent about it. Yeah, of course we're going to celebrate and we're going to give Deb her due, but I would just like to have your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Tokata talks about is definitely what I'm feeling. I think that it's both and, and as a longtime organizer and someone that, moves across a lot of different topics and areas of conversation and movement spaces, I think that we often spend a lot of our time in both and, right? Like this is one of those situations where we both see and feel the shift in power. Like her being confirmed is a major shift in power, and we can't underscore that. We can't underestimate it, and we can call it what it is, and that's a shift in power. And we need to acknowledge that. And our young women and our children and our girls, they need to see that it is possible to be in these spaces, and they need to have the analysis to understand that she is still operating within a system that wasn't made for us, right? And she's still operating within a system that was specifically designed to oppress us, right? And specifically within the Department of Interior. And so I think that we're just in that place of both and right now, a little bit more background from me and like some of the perspective that I have specifically around my current work is around, I'm the director of the Land Back campaign with Indian Collective, and Tokata and Chase and myself were all up on Mount Rushmore on July 3rd when myself and 20 other land defenders were arrested, basically calling attention to the fact that Trump was trespassing on our lands. Right. And we stood our ground. And from there, we developed out this campaign. And this campaign is not ownership of Land Back, the movement, or the meta narrative or any of that. This campaign is built to support and built to provide the infrastructure that's needed for Land Back, the movement. And but our biggest demand is to shut down Mount Rushmore and to return all public lands back to the original caretakers of the land. And then from that point, once we move beyond Black Hills, we are demanding that all public lands, 500 million acres of public lands across Turtle Island, be returned back to the original caretakers. And with Deb Haaland being confirmed, it's no longer it's not aspirational. It's actually possible. And we're organizing to win. Like, we're not organizing just to spin our wheels on stuff. Like, we're genuinely organizing to win. And so in thinking about that, it's major that Deb is in this position now. But what it does for me is that it really, it makes her my number one target, being in that position. And unfortunately, we have to still continue to organize, like, it is a win. And it is a step towards something that we're moving towards, right? But it is not the be all end all. It is not something to say like we celebrate and that is it. No, we celebrate and then we continue to work. We continue to grind, we continue to push hard, and we continue to push our demands on her the same way that we would of anyone else in that position. Just because she is a Native woman in that position does not mean that we back off and just hope that she pushes forward the policies and the practices that we need. It actually means the opposite of where we push harder and we come at it with more. And so for me, that's how I'm viewing these things, is really from that perspective of, let's celebrate this today. Let's celebrate her confirmation, and then like, let's get back to work tomorrow. And that's really, you know, the take that I have on it, because ultimately, you could have the best possible person in the presidency, in Congress, as a representative, as the Secretary of the Department of Interior. We could have the best people in those positions, with the best analysis, organizers, radical and moving forward progressive policies, but they're still operating with the confines of this system. In this system, this nation, this government was built on stolen land by stolen people. And those two are the pillars. So the continued invisibility of Indigenous peoples and the continued anti-Blackness that exists in this nation are the two pillars that uphold white supremacy. And that is the very thing that this nation was founded on. And that is the very system that unfortunately Deb Haaland now finds herself working in. And so, you know, it's an opportunity. It's an opening of a door a little bit. And now it's our job to like bust down that door. And so that's really the way I think about this moment and today.
We say hallelujah. It is a major power shift, Krystal. I do not disagree there at all. Euro male hetero patriarchy is dismantling. It is being deconstructed. It's causing this white fringe radical minority to commit mass shootings like the likes of which just happened within the last 24 hours. 8 Asian women were killed. So that kind of thing we're going to continue to see. We're going to have to deal with that. When you mention 500 million acres, that calls right into our consciousness the land back prophecy, which I read the words of Frank Foolscrow. And I believe that a lot of those who are born into colonial identities as Americans, as Canadians, as New Zealanders, as Australians, they want to give that land back as well. Because like Foolscrow said, if we just put land back in Indigenous hands, the world could begin to heal. We are in a time of climate collapse, or as the politicians like to call it, global warming or climate change. But I feel the sense of urgency. Deb is a power shift. Senator, what's her name in Luso, I think in Wyoming, and Senator Barrasso. As soon as Miss Haaland was about to be appointed, they passed a resolution in the Senate saying you cannot change the name of Devil's Tower. Like, they're putting protections up, they're putting their walls up as that power is shifting. So Tokata, if you have anything else to add on that, on your thoughts from the last topic, but thank you for slicing that, because that critical analysis is not, that's who we really are. And we're going to, I ran for the United States Congress in one of these states where 70% of the people vote for Trump. They're anti-maskers, and science deniers, thinking climate change is a hoax. I mean, we're surrounded by these people in our territories. And so I would like to turn it back to you. And if you see any potential opportunities or conflicts in light of Bears Ears, the protections that were afforded there, Oak Flat, Congressman Raul Grijalva recently introduced legislation to protect Oak Flat. Chaco Canyon, that's right in Deb Haaland's back door. I know you have friends over there. Of course, the Black Hills that's our mothership. But Tokata, I'd like to turn the mic back over to you.
Yeah. You, Krystal, for saying that, because I that position or that that department. We're celebrating each other, and we're celebrating the work and the progress that it is to be able to even say, right, that we have a foothold in an agency that has been responsible for so much violence. Personal level. In that, being able to see somebody who looks like me be there, and yeah, and I think that it's about everything else outside of the confirmation. It's about all of the people and underneath the department, and it's about all of the issues that we need to all Native country everywhere should be very much actively pushing against Deb Haaland to make sure that she understands that as a relative, right, we hold her to expectations that Americans don't have. And that means that when she makes promises that our future will be one that is guaranteed, right? Like when she says that she wants to commit to making this nation one that is striving to create a habitable planet, we need to hold her to that in every sense of the manner, right? From every angle and from every sacred site, from every tribal nation. I think that everybody has a stake here, even non-native peoples, right? It's about right now, land back is the policy that we need to ensure climate safety within the US and across the globe. Because when land is in Indigenous hands again, the world will be healed. And we know that as a fact. We know that because Indigenous people are responsible for 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. And land back is no longer an aspiration, like Krystal said. It is essential. And it is very much a real policy that is 100% present in our politics, and Deb Haaland's confirmation affirms that in every way.
We also had, it wasn't, Deb Haaland, she won her United States congressional race. Sharice Davids also won. Natalie Landreth, a NARF attorney, was recently appointed in the Department of the Interior in the Solicitor's Office. Heather Dawn Thompson was appointed in the Department of Agriculture. Tracy LeBeau, another Cheyenne River Sioux tribal member, was appointed to WAPA, the Western Area Power Administration. There are just huge changes that are happening, huge shifts. And I want to, Krystal, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about any of the work that you might have going on, how people in the audience might become involved in that. I know that we were all at Mount Rushmore together. We were all in a lot of places together. And it's crazy that, we're able to do this cut to the chase and have this webcast. And Tokata, what you said about Deb being our relative, like literally we are hardest on our relatives. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that is, but that's part of the blessing of being Indigenous. And so I do want to turn it over to you, Krystal.
Yeah, no, I mean, that what Tokata said about that, like, hit me too, of our relative. And like, as organizers, one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is accountability. And so that's the thing, is like, we are accountable to not only our peoples, but our families, our relatives, our four-legged relatives, the earth, the land, our mother. And so that doesn't change for her. She's still accountable to us, to the earth, and to the land, to the waters, to our four-legged, our animal relatives. So I think that was really powerful that Tokata named that. But in terms of the organizing happening, like we're pushing forward on the land back campaign. Like I said earlier, some years, as we build this ship and as we continue to push, expect land back legislation. Expect us to really push hard on that. I think also some of the other things to think about are really our demands. And so land back, we organize across movement spaces, and we organize to connect land back organizing and land back fronts that are happening all across Turtle Island. And we do that around 4 demands. And those 4 demands are to dismantle white supremacy in the institutions that continue to uphold and embody white supremacy, right? So our food systems, our education systems, our healthcare systems, our governing systems all embody and perpetuate white supremacy. And we're saying dismantle those and rebuild what we need. And we're also saying defund white supremacy and those mechanisms that continue to enforce it. And so we're talking about defunding the military, defund ICE, defund the police, defund Border Patrol, defund park services and park rangers. And so we're demanding those things around our campaign, and obviously return, just the way Tokata and Chase said, is return Indigenous lands back to Indigenous hands. Because as we know, we are on the front lines of climate change. We are the first ones impacted, and we are the first ones to go to work to prevent. And so I think that those lands need to be returned. And as we're seeing in the comments and we're seeing in these conversations, is that we know how to manage and steward these lands and be in right relationship. And so we therefore should be the models for how to move forward in that way. The last is consent, and Deb Haaland being confirmed is a major piece of that, of moving from an era of so-called meaningful consultation to an actual era of consent. And so really for Indigenous folks and for the Department of Interior to start implementing those practices and those policies that prevent municipalities or organizations or cities from consulting on our behalf with corporations that want to extract and destroy. And so for tribes and for nations and grassroots peoples to have the right to say no. And so I think that that's a major thing too that we're calling for. So we connect and organize across movement spaces for folks to champion land back and to really push these demands into spaces that we normally don't have access to, right? And I think with Deb Haaland there, that it is more possible than ever for these to be pushed forward. But I think it's really important for folks right now to really do the work to champion land back. Do the work to push that narrative out there so much to the point that when we submit legislation, people know it's coming. And to do the work to dispel the fear around that. No one's coming for your house. No one's coming for your private property, but we are coming for public lands. And so just like, naming those things is like dispel that fear, champion that message. The other piece is like, look around for land back struggles. They're happening all across Turtle Island. I mean, Chase named off a few of them, the Black Hills, Oak Flat, Chumash are fighting to prevent mansions from being built on their sacred lands. Bears Ears, Chaco Canyon, the Taloa, our relatives on the East Coast, simply fighting to be acknowledged and recognized as who they are, and just fighting to have some sort of relationship to land. There's land trusts that are coming up all across Turtle Island. Support those, like do the work to research and to find these struggles and support them, throw down with them, be there with them. And so I think like that's what it boils down to, is that we do this work and it's a significant thing, not just because of power, but because this is who we are as people. The previous speaker, he spoke and he said that we are the land. And our ceremonies and our language tell us that. And so we simply need to continue to carry that forward and do this work. And I think that now is the moment that we have to call on everyone. And as Chase mentioned, Standing Rock was a catalyst for that, right? And then we also we were able to build off the momentum that Black Lives Matter and the movement lives built around the death and the murder of George Floyd. And from that, they started tearing down colonial statues and calling out white supremacy and these symbols that uphold it. And the ultimate one of that is Mount Rushmore. And that's what really fed into us with Land Back campaign, to be able to take that action up there, was off of that momentum. And so we need each other now more than ever. And to be really frank, we don't win without each other. And so we have to continue to show up for each other, continue to throw down, and continue to push and hold people in these positions accountable. And just continue to call on relatives to be accountable to us, the same way that Tokata called on Deb Haaland to be a relative and be accountable.
Thank you for that. The white man has basically had this land for 240 years. They've been calling the shots and implementing their industrial, petrochemical reality. And they basically have brought us to the precipice of an extinction level event. This is why I think most people in this country support Land Back. And I do want to recognize George Floyd. Everybody who has made that sacrifice before their time, those represent, because of George Floyd, the cities begin to burn. Everybody who is in oppressed classes, racial and working class oppression in this country, that issue it will never go away. In fact, it'll continue to grow. But the Washington R-skins, a textbook racial slur, that name was changed because of George Floyd, because of Black Lives Matter. And we owe it to each other, as Krystal was saying, to show up for each other on an archetypal level. That cultural mythology that has founded this country in favor of, by and for white supremacists is crumbling. They know it. They know they're done. Their time is up. Everybody is on some woke stuff. Even our white brothers who are not racist, they know that these radical racists are an extreme fringe minority. They've oppressed not just indigenous peoples or people of other races that they've invented, but they've oppressed women. And Tokata, first of all, Krystal, I want to say thank you for the line. When you talk about showing up on the front line or showing up in those spaces, just like Chairman Mancia, reoccupying, reclaiming their villages. This is what happened at Mount Rushmore. And Nick Tilson is still facing wrongful charges, 17 years. Standing Rock, Line 3, there's a weekly update on Indian Collective about Line 3. And so I want to urge our listeners to check out Indian Collective, pay attention to what they got going on over there. Tokata, Indigenous feminism. I have never heard that term before. I am your father. I'm a very challenged male. If you could talk a little bit about that and just kind of what you've been up to. I know you've been neck deep in college.
Yeah.
But I just want to turn the mic back over to you.
Okay. Yes, I am in college in a pandemic, and that has definitely taken up the majority of my, as far as like tangibly getting like physical work done. But Indigenous feminism just simply means that my relationship to womanhood as an Indigenous woman includes the femininity and the feminine energies and powers of the earth and of things that wouldn't be considered human. I think that it is entirely unacceptable to exclude those beings and those entities from our activism and the work that we do to gain liberty for ourselves, because we can't have any of it, right, if we don't have the earth and if we don't have these life-giving beings and these life-giving entities to aid in our existence. And as a creator of life, I believe that it's only fair to recognize other creators of life, water, sun, earth, all of these things that make us human. I think that needs to be recognized when we advocate for ourselves in any fashion. And that's all I mean when I say that I'm an Indigenous feminist, is that when I fight for myself, because I am the land, because I am the water, right, I am also fighting for the earth. Yes, that's what that means. Yeah, and so definitely like missing and murdered Indigenous women, like the interconnectedness of the fossil fuel industry and our sisters who are going missing and being murdered because of the increased violence that those industries have allowed for in our territories, and that have gone unchecked by the current authorities in those territories. And so that's why I think that it's important for me to make that distinction when talking about feminism, because the most applicable form of feminism is white feminism, and that oftentimes, right, is only applicable for women, white women specifically, right, who can succeed within capitalism without fear of consequence for their skin color or where they're from or what their income is. I think that those are definitely all aspects that need to be included. So it's about intersectionality.
I appreciate that, because I also know that, in Indian country, Indigenous country, we contend with a lot of the programming that comes from white supremacist, religiously infused misinformation. And, a lot of our Indigenous leaders buy into that fallacy that of the Indigenous male chieftain with some Indian maidens in the background. It's ridiculous. But you have forced that evolution in me over this short amount of time here. But Krystal, I do want to give you a chance to make some closing remarks and just kind of, you've done other work. I really liked what you did with About Face. I think that was just dope how you and other veterans, because for me, Standing Rock, when the veterans came December 3rd, that was the watershed moment that the forces that control our economic reality, they had to make a move there, and it resulted in Obama denying that easement and telling the vets, it's time for you guys to go home. The veterans are left out in the cold in this country. A lot of our veterans are needlessly homeless. There's things, traumas, and I want to give you an opportunity to either speak about that or just give us some closing remarks. But again, we can do this again. I really, I just wanted to come on and give you guys, just turn it over to you guys, really, so you can tell the people what's up. That's what this show is for.
Yeah. So first off, I'm really proud of Tokata. I mean, it's such an honor to be on this show with her, and for us to be doing this work as family, right? That's really powerful. And also just wanted to add, like I'm a veteran. I've served 8 years in the Army, and I'm an anti-war veteran, anti-militarist, and it really goes to a lot of my experience, like personal experiences in the military that drove me to that, but also what it was is really, really looking at the history, right? So I mentioned briefly a little bit about the origins of this nation, right? And like what it was founded on. Well, it goes back to doctrine and discovery, right? Like a legal mechanism and religious mechanism that allowed for our lands to be claimed on behalf of a kingdom, right? And that basically is what said that these indigenous peoples need to be removed from their lands. And we've been fighting and resisting in organizing since then around land back. So the reality is land back goes all the way back to doctrine of discovery. And I think from that point, we have to really acknowledge that it was the US military that was the enforcing mechanism of removing us from our lands. So all of the massacres that had happened, all of the genocide, all of the removals was enforced by the US military. And so they are complicit in this as well. But that model, that template of settler colonization, of removing us from the land and like putting an entire nation on top of us, being enforced by the US military, is a model for US imperialism, right? And that's what we see happening to other indigenous lands overseas. That's what we see happen in Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, Palestine, all of our relatives in these other places. This is why it's so connected. As Tokata was laying out her understanding of indigenous feminism, it's all connected, right? It's all intersectional. And so we have to continue to come together. But I think that's the work that we did with About Face. So, I'm still a member of About Face Veterans Against War. They're a veteran-led anti-war, anti-militarism organization. And that's really the conversation, is they work around to demilitarize and deoccupy spaces, right? And those places that are occupied and militarized are indigenous lands. And so I think it's important to make those connections. And so the work that I do with Land Back is deeply connected to the work that I did with About Face around demilitarizing, because it's decolonization and demilitarization, and those two things go hand in hand. And so that's the work that Chase was referencing that I did beforehand. And I have a dream of, like one of the Land Back visions is where we don't have to send our kids off to war to become warriors and to reclaim that role in our societies. We don't have to send them off to go serve for an empire, right? But that we create ways in ways to like basically bring back this warrior role in our own communities, based in our values, our teachings, our culture, our language, and that our young people are able to be warriors and become that and embody that in our own communities, actually serving our people. And so I think that's a powerful thing. And I see that on our own lands. And that is a vision I have. And so, just that's the work around About Face. That's the work around demilitarization and decolonization, and how it links back to Land Back, and how it's very relevant in our communities, our indigenous communities. Because if you think about it, I mean, we have some Native communities that are 40% veterans in population. 40% of the population is veterans. But can you imagine if we politicize them and we train them and teach them how to translate our skill sets that we learned in the military over to actually serving in our own communities, over to nonviolent direct action, over to organizing and activism? I mean, that is a completely untapped population. And I have faith in that. And I have a lot of belief in being able to do that. And I rarely find other Native veterans that hold that same belief. And so it's definitely like a newer conversation. And so I definitely encourage veterans, if they're out there and they're hearing this, like reach out to About Face, reach out to me. We want to translate our skills over and truly become warriors and truly serve our communities, and protect our communities from exploitation, extraction, and all of these corporate interests that are coming at us left and right. And so, that's the work that we do with About Face. It's the work that I do within the Land Back campaign, how it's all connected. And so it's a really powerful way to move. And I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do with About Face, and proud of the veterans that showed up at Standing Rock. And I know that that's just the start. There's way more work to be done. And I'm excited about what we're actually going to be able to do now.
It's about healing. And real quick, what's up with the lawsuit that Energy Transfer Partners had filed? Is that done?
No. So we were able to get so I was sued for racketeering under the RICO Act. They had a federal lawsuit against me, because apparently I'm like the godfather, which is insane. But they had that, and the judge dismissed the case, basically saying there's no standing for that. And then they turned around and filed a lawsuit in North Dakota court So now that's where it's at, is they filed a lawsuit against me, myself, and several other folks in groups as well. So it's still ongoing. You know, and we're also still, you know, the misdemeanor charges from Mount Rushmore as well. So we got a couple of things going on, and, you know, yeah, but we're hopeful, and we're definitely organizing to get things dropped. So we're definitely praying and moving in that direction.
Washte. Tokata, I just wanted to give you some space to share some closing remarks. You know, what you're going through, what you're thinking. I know that you know, we are in a global pandemic, and we are in a human-caused climate crisis, and you've had to navigate that. And so, you know, there's no right way, there's no wrong way to do that. You're working with a lot of other young people, and we want to, you know, I have just learned to get out of your way when those time come. And so I want to give you the opportunity to share some closing remarks and anything you might have left out.
For sure. I'm trying. I don't think that there's anything I really left out. I think this conversation very much gave me a lot of hope. I think I can really feel, it feels very much like, you know, we should take this opportunity to strengthen ourselves as organizers and as activists and allies everywhere. Definitely take this as a victory, and know that, right, like, this is only the beginning of the work that we have to do. And Deb Haaland is a polyam, and I think that it is justified to recognize that a lot of times, right, her duties will lie elsewhere in the position that she's in. She is required to uphold colonialist ideals. Sure, that doesn't happen. We need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, so that when the time comes when we can organize safely, we are prepared and we have sort of next steps. Because, as Krystal was saying, like, this is 100% real, and the land back has never been more feasible than this moment. And I would just say to everyone, like, it really is time to prepare and ask ourselves the question, like, are we willing to accept that change is completely possible? Or are we going to idly wait around for somebody else to be appointed, right? Like, we cannot underestimate what this means for our nation as a whole.
Thank you for that. Krystal, do you have anything else to add? Or I don't want to keep you guys. We've been going hard here, and could probably go all night, but I will hit you up again. You can count on that. And you're just right down the street here most of the time. So thank you for what you do. But I want to give you a last chance if you had anything else you needed to add. Where can people find you? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, man, like, +1 to everything Tokata said. In like, I mean, if in reality, I encourage people to follow Tokata for this. I mean, like, I follow her and take her lead. And yeah, so I mean, I definitely encourage folks to follow her. As far as me, like, you know, landback.org is our website. You can follow Indian Collective on all of the social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all of that. It's Indian, like the letters Indian, like slang collective. You can follow us on any of those, and it's pretty up to date with all of the work that we're doing. We work across multiple different issues: racial equity, climate justice, land back, and education equity. So definitely give us a follow. And, I just really look forward to all of the work that we have ahead of ourselves. It's a lot, but, we were made for this. And there's a lot of prophecy around this. And so, it's time to get to work. And I look forward to working alongside Tokata and Chase and everyone else that's ready to throw down. So let's do this.
Thank you. Tokata, wana lila nish ake na wana hoye wayalo wio hiampatakia. Over that way, sending a voice up for you. You're over there by the ocean. Very good to see you. Anyway, you guys, thank you. We'll do this again. But Tokata, I don't think you've been on the socials a lot, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm bad at that.
Right. But thank you so much for giving your time and energy, you guys, to the show tonight. We can cut out. Doksha, okay, we'll see you soon.
Doksha.
All right. Wow. Again, just thank you. It's a blessing to have them on. I wanted to get their take, the Indigenous women perspective on what it meant to have Deb Haaland in this seat. Deb Haaland is, of course, the kind of like the apex appointment, a cabinet level appointment for President Biden. But I also want to make mention of a few people that I've had the opportunity to meet over the past 10 years, a few people that I look up to, some acquaintances, some relatives who've been appointed to key positions under the Biden administration. And this is just kind of a shout out. There's a brother named Armando Teller from the Dene Nation. He's a former Arizona state representative who just now left Arizona state legislature to take a new job in the Biden administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Tribal Affairs under Pete Buttigieg in the U.S. Department of Transportation. Again, I mentioned some Cheyenne River relatives. The first is Zach Ducheneau of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. He has now taken a post with the United States Department of Agriculture, the FSA, the Farm Service Agency, which is responsible for lending in Indian country. A lot of you might remember the Keepseagle case. Just big congratulations to those of you who have taken on this responsibility in these appointments. So shout out to Zach Ducheneau. Next is Heather Dawn Thompson. She's also from the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. Cheyenne River is well represented right now. She's a former federal prosecutor from right here in the Black Hills. She has now taken a post within the United States Department of Agriculture. She is the director of the Office of Tribal Relations. And I just want to say congrats. We just want to give you some showtime on our show tonight. The next one is another Cheyenne River enrollee. Her name is Tracy LeBeau. I met Tracy right after I got out of law school. She's been in long-time private practice, counseling in renewable energy development. She has held various posts within the U.S. Department of Energy, as well as WAPA, the Western Area Power Administration. It's just like the Bonneville Power Administration up in the Northern Plains. We're quite familiar with WAPA. It's just unheard of to think that Tracy LeBeau is the interim administrator and CEO at WAPA. So I definitely did not want to, give Deb props without giving all these just Indigenous stalwarts. These are pillars. These are people who've been in this work for a long time, who have careers in these fields in the Department of Energy. The next woman, her name is Walea Johns. She is Dene Nation. She's from the Navajo Nation. I don't say that with any pejorative. It's just like the word Sioux. It's something that the English-speaking universe recognizes. She is Dene. She's now the head of the Office of Indian Energy, the director of the Office of Indian Energy. I have to recognize her commitment. I first met her at Standing Rock. I've always respected her path at Native Renewables, and I just again want to congratulate you. I want to highlight your guys' appointments. We're in a different time, a different administration. The next is Jamie Pinkham. If we could bring a pic of brother Jamie Pinkham. I have not seen Jamie in a long time, but he is from the Nez Perce Nation, Pore Chloka Oyate. I know him when he was with the Bush Foundation, the Native Nations vice president of Native Nations, I believe was his title. And I don't know how that interfaces with the Native Governance Center. And I got to shout out Wayne Duchno, if you happen to be watching. I believe that's Zach's brother. And he's also Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. Anyhow, Jamie was working with Wayne over at the Bush Foundation. And then it looks like Jamie went to CRIT, the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, as their executive director. But he's got a long history standing up for salmon rights, treaty rights, indigenous sovereignty. It's good to see Jamie get a post inside the Army Corps of Engineers. And stay tuned here because the DAPL fight will heat up in April. That's when the next hearing is. But I want to give a shout out to Jamie Pinkham. Next is Natalie Landreth. I don't know if I definitely know who she is. I don't know if I got to meet her over the past 10 years, but she's Chickasaw. She spent 17 years at NARF. She was a longtime attorney there, based in Alaska. Again, she's a citizen of Oklahoma's Chickasaw Nation, and she has taken a role inside the Department of the Interior. She is now a deputy solicitor for land, which means she's one of the top attorneys as the deputy solicitor for land, a position that could place her in the middle of major legal questions and fights involving natural resource development and land protections in Alaska. She's also got experience and has advocated for her clients in the Bears Ears case and also the Keystone XL pipeline case. It's a different place right now, a different world. But I also want to shout, and that's the end of the shout outs. I also want to shout out those who served under President Trump, those who served under President Bush, those who represent indigenous country at all levels in all arenas. And I want to give a shout out to my colleague and classmate, Kevin Frost. Big ups to you, brother. I see you working out there. But I wanted to end the show with kind of a segment, a dive into something called HR 1, House Resolution 1 for the People Act of 2021. The purpose of this bill is to expand Americans' access to the ballot box, reduce the influence of big money in politics, strengthen ethics rules for public servants, and implement other anti-corruption measures for the purpose of fortifying our democracy and for other purposes. This bill is viewed as a signature piece of legislation since the Democrats, the blue team, controls the House right now. They are the House majority, and the White House and the Senate, but in a very narrow way. There are no more excuses. A bit about the bill, though. After the House passed the bill in 2019, it was blocked from receiving a vote by the Republican-controlled Senate under a certain former Senate majority leader. You might remember this leader. He would not let Obama appoint Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court. And, he plays a significant role. And I don't know if he's up for re-election, but if we could get a graphic of him up here, some of you might know who I'm talking about, but we have to pay. There he is. That is my friend, brother Mitch McConnell. Our editors and those in the control room weren't quite sure if we should use that graphic. They thought it might be a bit too pejorative. It might cut a little too deeply, but you know what? We are in a fight against fascism. This man right here, the former Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has not only blocked Obama's appointment of Merrick Garland, but he helped fill over 200 federal judges' seats across the country. And so it's no small battle that is happening. And part of our work that I do with Lakota Law, that I do with Last Real Indians and whoever, is to educate and to increase our role and our participation in our democracy. And so, there is no excuse right now. Presumably, the blue team, we control the Senate. It controls the Senate. And that is a very narrow split, a 50-50 split between Democrats and Republicans, with 50 blue senators, 50 red. And the Democratic Vice President, Kamala Harris, holds the tie-breaking vote. Now, this calls into question the filibuster. Many Senate Democrats have expressed support for abolishing the filibuster, but Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema remain opposed. And we'll keep you posted on any developments regarding the filibuster. But it is a way for a minority party to punch above their weight, so to speak. And right now, it seems like a good idea to get rid of it because the blue team controls the Senate, the House, and the presidency. But if the table should turn again and fascists would hold court again, then we could be in a very different situation. This bill, H.R. 1, would require states to offer same-day voter registration for federal elections. It would permit voters to make changes to their registration at the polls. It would require automatic voter registration where eligible citizens who provide information to state agencies, including state departments of motor vehicles or public universities or state departments of social services, anytime we interact with these state agencies, they are required by law to update our voter registration. We should be automatically registered to vote unless we opt out. And I know of one particular state, South Dakota, that is not doing this because there is a live lawsuit, a live controversy brought with Native American Rights Fund, the Oglala Sioux Tribe, and the Rosebud Sioux Tribe, and soon to be the Lakota People's Law Project. Now, this bill, H.R. 1, would introduce voluntary public financing for campaigns. The money would come from a new Freedom from Influence Fund that would be housed within the U.S. Department of the Treasury. This fund would collect money by charging a small fee assessed on criminal and civil fines and penalties or settlements with banks and corporations that commit corporate malfeasance. There should be no shortage of that happening on Wall Street. It also incorporates campaign finance reform provisions from the Disclose Act. Some of you may remember that. Some of this is just too much. It's too difficult to keep track of all this stuff. That's why you need to tune in to Cut to the Chase, because we'll bring you kind of the latest of what we think we should all be paying attention to. But the Disclose Act would have imposed stricter limitations on foreign lobbying. It would require super PACs, political action committees, and other dark money. Think Koch brothers, think ALEC, think Vladimir Putin and the NRA, even George Soros and the neoliberals. And I don't know, anybody out there who's listening, you're all still listening. Thank you for that. Anybody who's been accused of receiving money from George Soros, anybody who's ever protested, anybody who's ever frontlined or sought to defend our constitutional rights, or to ally with Black Lives Matter, or just confront those who would encroach upon our human inherent birthrights to clean water and healthy ecosystems. You have all been accused of receiving George Soros money, and I would like to know where my check is at. Actually, where's my Indian check, for that matter? But let me get back on track here. Under this bill, organizations would be required to disclose their donors. The bill expresses support for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. This is the Supreme Court case which held that limits on independent political expenditures by corporations, labor unions, and other associations are unconstitutional. That means those restrictions can't be in place. They're protected as speech, as political speech, meaning big money, big extraction, big oil, big finance, the billionaire class can continue to buy all of our elections and fill all of our elected leaders' campaign coffers with their dirty money. We all know that our country is in a state of crisis. We shouldn't have to continue to fight for our lives and our dignity and make the sacrifices that those who are at line 3, those who have perished as casualties in the war against colonial capitalism, during Black Lives Matter and in other places, those who've committed themselves and who know that they are the true patriots of this land, those who are not racist, those who do not seek to divide our people through racism or fear or hate or division, those who do not want to continue the racial and class subjugation that is happening, working class subjugation that is happening. Those who want Medicare for all, those who want student debt forgiven, those who want clean water, those who want a livable wage. Anybody, any one of us who has to trade our time for money is part of the working class in this country. And we have to continue to stand up. We have to continue to be there for each other, as Krystal Tubuls said earlier. And that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sticking with us for that full hour and a half. My team knows I want to shoot for 1 hour, but sometimes it just takes a little time to get things in order. Apologies to Chairman Mancia of the Comecrudo. That little technical difficulty, we will fix that. We would like to have you back on. Tokata Iron Eyes, our daughter, thank you for giving us your time and your energy tonight on the show. And with that, I just want to say Lila Wopila Tanka I Chichapelo, from the heart of the Black Hills, the center of everything that is, from the Republic of Lakota. This is Cut to the Chase, and we're out.